thankfully, a group of Tories is backing an amendment which has been tabled by Sir Alok Sharma. You might remember him. He was the guy who was the former COP26 president and burst into tears at the end of COP26 in Glasgow because it had all been so emotional for him, because saving the planet takes a lot of work and emotion. I mean, who pays these people, right? What a load of old cobblers. Plans are now being drawn up, basically, so that there's some kind of compromise deal. So Rishi Sunak, who looked as if for one moment was going to sort of move away a little bit from net zero, push it sort of slightly further away. 2030, maybe not the right time to get rid of petrol and diesel cars. Maybe make it 2035 or maybe even 2130. Let's just, you know, push it into the long grass so that people don't get too upset. But unfortunately, he appears to have sort of slightly gone back the other way. Let's talk to Andrew Montford from Net Zero Watch. He's their director. Andrew, very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. We were sort of hopeful at one point that Rishi Sunak might be moving away from the sort of eco-zealots and more towards the ordinary people of the country and watering it down a little bit, his net zero commitments. But it doesn't look that way, does it?
No, I think we've been led astray like this before. I think what Rishi Sunak is doing is he's trying. This is more about internal party management than actual serious policy making. The Parliamentary Conservative Party is so divided on the net zero issue that it's very difficult for him to do anything at all. So while he can say that he's going to allow airports to be developed, in reality, that probably won't happen. He's got a net zero target set in law, so you know that will go straight to the courts to decide whether that is something that he can reasonably do. So he's powerless there. And you know, and the thing on the wind farms is equally dodgy. Fine, it might keep the Green side of his party on board, but whether it will actually amount to anything remains to be seen. I've certainly seen some comments from, if you like, environmental activists who are saying, you know, there actually seems to be less to this than meets the eye. So that may be nothing at all. So, yeah, I think this is just trying to keep his party together as we head into, you know, an election campaign over the next year or two.
I do sort of despair, though, don't you, Andrew, that, you know, we are now driven by these kind of maniacs in power who have bought and completely swallowed the net zero myth that somehow whatever net zero is, if we can manage to achieve it, we will save the planet. You know, I was watching Laura Kunzberg's show yesterday, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, who used to be, you know, slightly eccentric, relatively kind of decent guy who, you know, cooked some nice food and did a nice little show down in the River Cottage, whatever it was called. And he's now gone sort of full eco-nutter. He's basically complaining that we are not doing enough to get to net zero quickly enough, that Rishi Sunak is an absolute enemy of the people. And it's almost as though they're all in some kind of cult that none of us get.
Well, it is definitely a cult. So, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And, of course, the thing about cults is that if you say you oppose them, then they come down on you like a ton of bricks. Yes. So if Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall jumped up and said net zero is a load of cobblers, then, you know, he would probably never appear on television again. And so, yeah, he's very sensibly saying, yes, I'm all for this net zero stuff. Now, whether he actually believes it or not, who knows?
No, but it's worse than that.
Maybe just
but it's worse than that because they get so vitriolic about the people who might be in some way in the way of it, because no matter what you and I think of Rishi Sunak's green policies, you know, they're not green enough for Hugh Fearnley and his mateys, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is never enough. No matter what Rishi Sunak does, it will not be enough for the environmental fanatics, and they will go on criticising him for not going far enough. And they will carry on like that until they have managed to crash the economy, and they'll probably carry on even then, because these people they've got religion, and they will just carry on no matter the cost to us.
Yes. I mean, basically, the government will reject, it says here, the Climate Change Committee's formal advice that all airport expansions must be halted. You mentioned airports in the past. But, I mean, are there really any proper sort of concrete plans, if you like, to build or expand airports anymore?
I think the reality is that it will prove too difficult for the Conservative Party to allow any airport expansion at all. And of course, with what they're doing to the economy, that we're all getting poorer so quickly now. There probably won't actually be a lot of calls for new airports. The economy is just not going the way of expanded airports, expanded travel, better lifestyles. We're going the way of, less travel, poorer, more poverty, and worse lifestyles. So, I don't think it'll happen in reality.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know whether you've seen this particular story today, but about Glasgow's ULEZ style scheme has been criticised today because they've done some measurements up there ever since they brought it in from June to August. And it turns out that actually particulates and pollution levels in the supposedly clean air zone have got worse. So last year, when they didn't have it, the figures are actually better. Apparently, nitrogen dioxide levels were measured at an average of 34 micrograms per cubic metre between June and August of this year, whereas the previous year they were actually lower, which is extraordinary.
It is absolutely extraordinary. The Glasgow ULEZ scheme is almost as shambolic as London's. I mean, I don't know whether you heard the stories that the Glasgow bin lorries don't conform with the ULEZ, right, so they can't go in the city centre to empty the bins anymore. And the lorries that removed illegally parked cars are also non-compliant and can't get into the city centre anymore. I mean, this is just joke politics. This is a major UK city run by the numpties, the numptocracy, you might call them.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a great word. I like it. I may have to adopt that for future use. But yeah, I mean, this idea, and I say this all the time, and I probably said it to you, and you'll probably go, you've already said that to me. But, whenever I say to any government minister or anyone who's in favour of net zero, what is it? When is it net zero? What is it? What are we going to call it? And what does it mean to you? They can't, one, explain what it is, apart from some mealy-mouthed explanation of, offsetting the carbon that you spend and carbon capture and all the rest of it. But then they say, and then when you say, well, what benefit will it be to us? They can't tell you that either.
No, and again, we're left in this situation of trying to work out whether they actually believe in net zero or they just believe that, they're better to keep their heads down and say that they believe in net zero. I don't know. I mean, this is the kind of games that politicians play. And I think, eventually, though, reality is going to rear its ugly head. And it's essentially, at the end of the day, physics, thermodynamics says that what we're trying to do is really impossible. And eventually the costs are going to hit home. People are going to start to suffer badly. And at that point, I think politicians will have to turn around and start to be slightly more realistic. It won't happen in this parliament. The Conservative Party, as I said, is completely divided. But I think once they're out of power, as looks inevitable, then they may be in a position to reassess and start to say, look, OK, we actually have to come up with some realistic policies here now. That's not guaranteed, of course. They may choose to stay on the green bandwagon, in which case, who knows what the general public will do. Will they go to, will they escape to the Reform Party or one of the other small parties? I don't know. But it's not looking good for the UK public for many years to come.
It really isn't. But we've seen quite a sort of radical, I would say, opposition in large numbers from people about the ULEZ expansion in London. And I'm not just talking about sort of Blade Runner types, I'm talking about ordinary people. If you talk to ordinary people in the street, nobody really wants it, they're not happy about it, and many of them are saying they won't pay the fines if they get them. It already looks like the fines are now certainly in question about certain types of cars, particularly older cars, which the cameras are not recognising properly. So, I mean, it is possible, I think, if you push people enough and you make them pay more money than they really want to, that they might become just a little bit revolutionary.
Yeah, and we've seen this in the past, didn't we? We saw it over Brexit. Eventually people started to vote against, their natural political homes, if you like. And, once those polls started moving against David Cameron all those years ago, he suddenly upped and decided, OK, we are going to have a referendum. And I think this is the kind of thing that we might expect to see with the Conservatives over things like ULEZ and net zero. If where Rishi Sunak is in the polls at the moment, he's on 24% or something. Right. I saw recently, that's the kind of thing where something has to change if the party isn't going to be wiped out. But at the moment, they seem to have this sort of suicide tendency, don't they? And they're just going to do it anyway. They believe so much in the net zero thing that they are just going to take themselves into electoral disaster. It is a remarkable thing that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like they've taken control of the clattering train and decided to just drive it off a cliff and go, it'll be all right when we land. Don't worry, it'll be fine, absolutely fine. And people are kind of going, actually, I think I'm just going to bail out now.
No, that's right.
And they really should. So what will we expect then tomorrow in terms of a parliamentary vote? Because the energy bill, no doubt, has got all these different amendments which will be heard. We've heard about Alok Sharma's one. I mean, there will be presumably other amendments coming from perhaps opposite side of the Conservative backbench arena, where some people want to make it a little bit more watered down. The Tories are worried about losing the vote. Presumably the Labour Party will vote with it, won't they?
Yeah, I imagine that the Labour Party are probably opportunistic enough to sort of they'd rather inflict a defeat on the government than actually do anything that will help out the man in the street. I mean, yeah, the immediate political gains will probably weigh heavier in their minds. Yeah, there's all sorts of things in the energy bill that are really quite disturbing. I don't know whether you read the story over the weekend. You know, the ministers are going to award themselves powers to create new criminal offences over household insulation, which is, you know, I've read the clause. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand it. It looks the kind of thing that could be very problematic for ordinary people, but there's other people saying, well, no, this will only apply to major property developers and landlords and things, and we just don't know. And yeah, this is the problem, is that our legislation is so badly written.
It's very opaque, isn't it? Nobody can get their heads around it. So what you get is a mixture of people saying, this is a nightmare, it's the worst thing ever, we're all going to be locked up and you know, and prevented from leaving our homes because they're not insulated. Well, clearly that's not going to happen, but at the same time it might be prejudicial to business. It might be prejudicial to people trying to make a living, you know. So
the uncertainty is the thing that's so difficult, isn't it? You know, you just don't know where you stand. You know, where I live in Scotland, you know, we have this thing that they're talking about, saying, well, you're not going to be able to mortgage a house that doesn't meet certain insulation standards. Now, for me, living in an old Victorian house, you know, that is potentially a major problem. I may not be able to sell my house, but I don't know. We're just not at all sure what the politicians have got planned for us.
No.
And this is one of the things that is so bad about net zero, is it takes away people's confidence about the future. We just don't know what these environmental radicals are going to come up with next. And so the uncertainty makes you not want to invest, makes you not want to change anything, do anything. You're just going to sit tight and wait and see what they do. And that's a very nefarious effect of net zero policy.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Andrew, thanks very much indeed. Andrew Montford, Director of Net Zero Watch. We'll bring you all of that, of course, tomorrow as it happens.